So here's the view that we just had. Now I'm out of the picture and behind the camera now. And so we just want to kind of take an overview of the front yard, which is where we were sitting at. What you're seeing in front of you is Mexican sage. And among the things that were left over from the garden from how it was before, this Mexican sage was one of the last remnants. And it's essentially been able to survive despite me really not giving it any water whatsoever. And it still does okay. That it does go dormant a bit in the summertime, but if I were to regularly irrigate it, it would certainly keep coming back every year and being in flower like it is right now for most of the year. But for my purposes, I want to not use that much water, and really things are at a place where for the most part it can rely on just the annual rain, and that's enough to keep it going. As you can see, we've got a whole lot of evergreens, and we'll kind of point out some of the ones that we have. We got a little bit of activity from a little family of sparrows that are up there in that birdhouse up along the house up there. They had 2 chicks this year, and usually have a couple chicks every year, and they've been a great enjoyment for us, along with some of the other birds that really enjoy and make use of the different plants that are here as a food source, and things like that. So we'll take you around and just kind of do an overview. So that this used to be, for the most part, all grass, all throughout the front yard. So imagine all of this just being replaced by grass. And so you can see we've got a lot of different plants that have been put in. I like the aesthetic of having things be more like nature, and so have a lot of them packed together a little bit in competition with one another. Certainly we kind of help out that competition by pruning here and there, but really that's all the maintenance that needs to be done in the garden. And it's really up to my own personal aesthetic as far as how nice and neat that I want things to be. We did clean things up a little bit for the tour this year, and it'll be the case next year, but there's still definitely a wild feel for the garden. What I do want to point out as far as some of the first couple of plants that got put in, one was actually by accident. So if we kind of step away from the curb here, the 2 plants that are up here are some 2 coyote bushes. And the one that's over here on the right-hand side, that was one that was intentionally planted. But the one that's over there, notice it's coming just right up at the edge of the sidewalk. So when we had bought the house, the previous owner had the lawn and had it cared for by one of these mow and blow crews. And once we decided we were going to go native, we had them stop mowing the lawn. And that what happened, and what appeared to be the case, was that this Baccharis over here was already there, and essentially the guys, as they were mowing the lawn, were just continuously mowing it back down, so it never really was able to grow pretty tall. But it had its roots there, and as soon as we stopped mowing, all of a sudden this little Baccharis just started sprouting up. And I got some inspiration to grow these and kind of train them to be almost tree-like, and it has a kind of neat aesthetic to letting them be more tree-like, especially kind of sticking out here on the corner. There's been some just really interesting things, kind of seeing how the growth pattern happens on these. The other thing to mention is so that the Baccharis are dioecious, and so that they have separate male and female flowers on different plants. And it turns out that this one here that was planted, there happened to have been 2 separate plants that were in the same pot. One happened to be male and one happened to be female. And so what we get then is we get a whole bunch of different babies every year, with the male and female plants fertilizing one another. And as we look across some of the other places, we've got one Baccharis back up closer to the house that's in a little central area that was kind of one of the last places that I changed and put natives, but that was a little volunteer, and I've kept the idea of training that one as a tree. And then there are other ones like this one here. This is a female plant that I do kind of want to cut down perhaps, but you know, sometimes you just can't let them go. So to talk about some of the other plants that are here, we've got a lot of Encelia california, which is the bush sunflower. A lot of these, their flowers have been spent. We've got some that are behind it up here that a lot of their flowers have been spent. And so I haven't deadheaded those, and if I did, those would still continue to bloom. And these are some examples of things that really do go summer dormant, but then come back once we get rain, and just are nice bright spots of yellow when they're in bloom. And then in front of that, this is purple sage. Like the nice contrast in the gray color on the foliage. And we got a variety that's kind of more low growing, and so it stays a little bit low to the ground. Still has a couple flowers on it, if I remember. Maybe there's not some in bloom. You can kind of see the inflorescences are just coming up over there. And then underneath it, this is a fuchsia, and got some little poppies that have come up. And then next to it, this is some golden yarrow. And then another one of our wildflowers, this is the elegant clarkia, has popped up. Now this is a rather sad elegant clarkia, but it has put up its flowers anyway. And then between the elegant clarkia and the golden yarrow this is a Shaw's agave. And this is actually a pup from a plant that we have in the backyard. And as it's put out pups, I've taken a couple of them and transferred them into the front yard. So there's another one back over there, and then another couple here on the front. The nice thing about Shaw's agave, especially right next to the sidewalk, is that they are definitely some deterrents for how's it going? They are definitely some deterrents for, as there was a dog walking by, of dogs coming and pooping in the front yard and that type of thing. Now, I do have my own dogs and I love dogs, but this is a just nice advantage of having some spiky thing at the edge of the sidewalk that can deter visitors to the garden that aren't necessarily wanted. So then the other thing behind the golden yarrow, so up here, this is some Howard McMinn manzanita, and it has already gone past its bloom, but it is still putting out some new growth with the rains that we've been having this spring, and even looks like we might still be able to put out some new flowers. These are flowers that were put out, or flower stalks that were put out this year with that new growth, and it looks like they're starting to envelop and getting ready to give us another bloom. So that's really cool, something to look forward to. And then now this is my wife wanting to video me videoing the garden. Yeah. And so we got a little bit of that action going on. So down here at the front, there's another Howard McMinn, and then next to it, this is a San Diego sage, or Munz's sage, so Salvia munzii, and it's kind of at the end of its bloom. It's still got a little bit of its flowers that are up on there, and this is a really neat one that it will kind of shrink back a bit in the summertime and go summer dormant, and then largely it won't be all that spectacular to look at, but it's still an interesting plant to look at all year round. But then once we get rains in the fall, then it really brightens up and puts out this great green growth and these nice purple flowers. And then behind that we've got growing along here is I got some inspiration by the Madonna Inn up in San Luis Obispo, where they've got a natural fence that's composed of some apples, some crab apples, I think, like that. They've been trained to grow as a fence. And so I thought, well, hey, let me try that with some wild grape. And so what we've got are some wild grape growing along this natural fence line that I keep low, and then right now it's just kind of putting out its new spring growth. Now, just like the bacchus, that a lot of the wild grapes are things that do have separate male and female flowers, and we have this one that's here on the left-hand side of the entryway that is coming up and growing up over the arbor that I put in. And this one that's growing over the arbor, that's actually the female plant. And it turns out then on the other side we do have a male plant that only puts out pollen flowers. So we do get a fair number of grapes from the female. We get about 8 or 10 bunches or so last year, so enough for me to have a snack, just as kind of a fun little feature, edible feature from this garden. So here we have some of the Encelia californica that are in bloom, and below this Encelia that's in the front, we've got one of the spots where we have a milkweed that's coming up, and this is one that I planted. We've got a couple that have just come up on their own. So part on this side of the walkway, we've got another narrow-leaf milkweed, Asclepias fascicularis, that's coming up. Now, so far, none of my milkweeds have ever flowered, but they do get monarchs on them every year that take down the foliage. But give them a couple years. I think that we'll find some that are happy and giving us some flowers. This is a little Dudleya, this is Dudleya edulis, if I remember. I think this is, I don't remember which Dudleya. It's the, now I'm spacing. I'll have to go back and look it up later. We got two of these same Dudleya, are these spots here, and got a nice poppy in between. And then there's another different type of Dudleya that's up over there. And there's also up on the other side of the walkway. You have these two same types of Dudleya on this side. They're doing much better on this side. So this is also the same one that was closest to the house. And then this one on the other side. I think this is Dudleya edulis. And you can see the inflorescences on this. It's a really cute little Dudleya, and they seem to be doing just fine just here in this little planter area where the trees are coming up. All right, so other things to note on this side. So we have some giant wild rye that planted up here. We got 2 of them there. And what you can't see in between them, there's a little honeysuckle that, the honeysuckles love to grow up in between plants. And so I've just put a little honeysuckle down there that is gonna work its way up and grow on these wild rye, and then come up above them, stick their flowers up above them. And then on the edge over here, this is another salvia. So this is a hybrid Salvia Vicky Romo. It's a hybrid of Salvia apiana, which is the white sage, and then Cleveland sage. And it's got these really great pink flowers. The flowers are nice and big, and the plant itself actually gets pretty big. So this is, maybe a couple inches shorter than I am, almost maybe about 5 feet high or so. And it's growing amongst another volunteer, a baccharis. This one is actually a male plant that I do cut down to the ground every year, but it sprouts up. They do have pretty vigorous growth, these baccharis. So coming up on the other side, we've got a Baja fairy duster. This is a great plant that's evergreen through most of the year and also flowering for most of the year with these cute little red puffballs that the hummingbirds love. And in fact, you can hear one of the hummingbirds right now. This is part of his territory. Of course, as soon as I stopped, he stopped singing. He's up there. There he goes. So he's probably the dad of some hummingbird babies that we had earlier this year. We'll show you where the hummingbird nest was. So talking about this Baja fairy duster. It definitely puts out lots and lots of seeds. The hummingbirds do a good job fertilizing these, and so we do get some volunteers that come up, but they're really fun to stick in pots and give to other people and things like that. Behind it, one that's just coming out, this is a great plant. This is the desert willow. So it goes winter dormant and is just now starting to put out its leaves. This is the burgundy variety that will have these nice burgundy flowers that are nice tubular flowers, great for hummingbirds to fertilize as well. And then the next one is one of our manzanitas, another one of our manzanitas that we got. This is a Refugio manzanita. So it's got this nice tall growth. It's really, this was one of the first ones we put in the ground, and it just literally shot up the first couple of years. And now most of the growth is just, you know, a couple inches every year, but really what changes once it gets to full size is just the amount of flowers and fruits that it puts out. So really nice little kind of angles on the leaves. And when the new growth emerges, we got some new growth over here. It's this nice, cool reddish color. So really, really pretty. So then, coming up on this side of the walkway, we've got a toyon, and then some black sage right next to it. And the toyon here is in a spot where the previous owner had put in some English holly, of all things, and it was doing fairly well, but didn't like the fact that I stopped watering it. And so I thought, well, you know, if English holly was growing there, well, why don't we put in a California holly? So we put in the toyon, and then this is one that actually had some trouble and died back a couple years back, right after it flowered and fruited for the first time. And so I cut it back down to the ground, and so this is all sprouted back up from the ground, and it seems to be doing okay. It's growing a little bit more bush-like rather than kind of tree-like, which is like the other toyon that we've got over here. And this year has been fun because this is the first time that this toyon has flowered and fruited for us. And so we get some mockingbirds that are primarily the birds that are going after those toyon berries, and they're dropping some toyon berries all over in the area over here. And so I'm curious to see if we'll get some volunteers coming up. Right next to it, this is also one of the first plants that we put in the garden. This is a California sagebrush. Great smelling plant and just really cool architecture to the plant. I did trim this back a lot for the tour this year, so otherwise it would have a lot more of the old growth kind of down below. And you know, some folks don't like how the sagebrushes look as they age, but you know, I love them. I think they're great little plants. And then right next to it is one of my favorites. You're going to hear me say that a lot. So this is yellow bush snapdragon. So it's just got its flowers just starting to put out, haven't flowered yet. These are ones that will look completely dead in the summertime, and so you kind of got to put it in a place that's maybe not going to necessarily be in front of things, but where you can enjoy it when they do come into bloom. And I like this because it's right as we first come off of our front porch, that we can come down to our sidewalk, and if it's in flower, just get a nice enjoyment of the yellow bush snapdragon that's up there. So it's a Kekiella antirrhinites. And then right next to the yellow bush snapdragon, we got some white sage. And then on either side of the walkway, we've got it mirrored with two buckwheats. So the Eriogonum fasciculatum, and these are just now starting to get into bloom. These are just amazing plants. They are in blooms for so much of the year. There's so many different types of pollinators and predators of those pollinators, just going through all these different investigation of the flowers and using the flowers as habitat. So they really bring so much to the garden. And you know, they they can get to be a pretty big. So I'm at almost, I would say I'm at eye level right now, and you can see that we've got these buckwheats that are growing up almost 5 feet, 6 feet tall or so. And then past the buckwheats on this side, this is another one of the very first plants that we put in once we went to the native garden. And this is a, why am I spacing on it? Dr. Hurd manzanita. So this is one of the tree-like manzanitas that, ironically, this is one that's supposed to end up being much taller than the refugio manzanita that we just saw before. But this one has taken its sweet time getting to be the height, and so it's still a little bit shorter than that refugio manzanita, but it's one that will get much bigger. And so it's a nice specimen to have kind of right front and center of the yard for us to enjoy from the front and for people to enjoy walking by. It's also just now starting to put out some of its growth, and I think it's getting ready to flower again too. So this has been a good year for our manzanitas. And then kind of walking through, we're walking right next to the grape fence that's coming up. And next to this, we've got 2 plants. We have this oak tree that, in my my gusto for putting in natives, that went to native area in Walter Anderson and picked up a bunch of plants from their native area, and this oak was in that area, and it is not native. It is most likely a European oak, but oaks are great habitat plants, and so we've left it here as it is so far. And then next to, growing underneath the oak, another one of these first plants that we put in. This is a sunset manzanita. And if you're going to plant a manzanita, especially one that you want relatively low growing, kind of small bush size, can't go wrong with sunset manzanitas. Man, they are pretty hardy and can withstand a lot of stuff. Then next to the sunset manzanita is an ashy leaf buckwheat. So another one of our buckwheats come down here. And then next to that ashy leaf buckwheat, then this is a red buckwheat. So Eriogonum gran rubescens, I believe is the species name. And then next to that, this is another really interesting plant that are among all these kind of grayish colored leaves. This is the Corythrogene phalanginifolia. And so it put out these nice, cute little purple aster-type flowers, and otherwise just kind of shrinks back in the background. Like my goal is to have the buckwheats kind of grow over it and have it stick out underneath the buckwheats and pop out its cute little purple flowers. So there's another sunset manzanita on top of, right across the pathway from there that we've put in. And then there are some Dudleya britones, so different types of Dudleyas that are up over there. These are ones that are just put in a couple weeks ago, so that I'm looking forward to them expanding their growth. And notice that we've got a lot of green that's in the walkway in between the paths of the flagstones along here. And yes, it does look as though that I am not doing my job with weeding, and these technically are not weeds, although weeds are something that is just not growing where you want it to, and so I guess you could consider these weeds. But these are a Enotheria elata, which is Hooker's evening primrose. And so we got one of the Hooker's evening primroses flowers is over here. So there's the flower on the Hooker's evening primrose. These are great annuals that come up and just drop down a ton of seeds, and they start out as rosettes along the ground, and you can kind of identify them because they've got basically white in the veins on the leaves. So all these are those Hooker's evening primrose. And so these are all more of these Hooker's evening primroses. And once they get ready to flower, they put up these giant spikes that we've had them get to be almost to the height of the eaves in some places. They can get really tall and are just covered with these yellow flowers in summertime. And then after they flower, the stalk will die back, and they leave behind these seed pods that just have tons of seeds inside that serve as food for, we get a lot of finches, goldfinches, different warblers that come along and will just eat the or eat the seeds all through fall. And so we leave the stalks up there just so we help out our local bird populations. But as a part of them putting out all of these seeds, that the birds clearly do not eat all of them, because we get so many that are just popping up all over the place. So still, all of these are all evening primroses. So the two plants that we've got in front here, this is a western redbud. So it goes winter dormant, but then comes back with these nice cute little pink flowers. And this is also one of the ones that we put in, and this thing's supposed to be a tree, man, but it's 10 years on. We had it as a 5-gallon plant, and it's, I would say, maybe has grown like 2 feet since we put it in. So it's probably not the happiest spot for a redbud, but I just love the shape of the leaves, and then those flowers when they first come in. So I'm struggling whether or not to decide to rip it out. One thing you can do is you can hack these back down to the ground. Apparently, I haven't done it yet, just because I'm a little bit uneasy about it. And then they should sprout up from the ground and grow taller. So maybe we'll experiment with that next year. The plant that's behind it, this is Nevin's barberry, so Mahonia nevinii, and this is one that's basically locally extinct in the wild, and it has this great red growth when it comes out, and has all these berries that will turn red once they're ripe, and they otherwise have these yellow flowers. We got some that are in flower, so we can find. Here's what the flowers look like. And this is totally evergreen, tough plant. It can survive with pretty much no water once it gets established, and can basically just become this thicket that has just really sharp leaves, so things like cats won't want to go in it at all, but the birds absolutely love the berries. And then I can also tell a little bit of an interesting story about Nevin's barberry. All right, so I said that I had an interesting story about the Nevin's barberry that we got back over here. So this is one of these stories where my job as a husband is to embarrass my wife. And so we were walking at the Wild Animal Park. So we're here in San Diego, and we're at the San Diego Wild Animal Park, or the Safari Park as it's called these days. And going out towards the condor exhibit, they have a little patch that has one of these Nevin's barberries that's there. And the plant that they had there was doing really well and was just absolutely covered with berries. And the berries are edible, for humans, not just birds. So I grabbed a couple berries while people were walking by, and my wife was totally mortified. And then to top it all off, I had a little snack of Nevin's barberries from the Wild Animal Park. And then also that I was able to collect some of the seeds from them and sprout the seeds. So we've got a plant that's in the backyard that was most likely sprouted from some of the seeds that were there at the Wild Animal Park. Well, actually, I probably shouldn't be telling you that I did that, because I think I need permission to collect them. So don't do that. All right, so the other thing we can point out next to the Nevin's barberry, so we've got some more white sage. This is when we had a white sage plant that was put in this spot here, but it died back. Probably got attacked by ants and some of their aphid or their hemipteran scale partners, and so the original white sage plant died. But then it left some progeny right next to it, and so that it happens to be one of the next oldest white sages that we have in the front, and it seems to be doing pretty well. It's putting out its flowers and just getting ready to flower. So then next to that, and this is also one of the first plants that we put in, and this is another manzanita. This is a sentinel manzanita. So it's one that's supposed to get a bit bigger, but this is a plant that's like 10 years old, and it's still only maybe about 3.5 feet high. But otherwise seems to be doing okay. It's just kind of a slow grower. It's not in an area that gets a lot of water, and the soil's pretty poor in that area. It doesn't really drain or soak in really well, and so that could be part of the reason why it's not doing super hot. But it's otherwise doesn't look unhealthy. It's just taking its sweet ass time in order to get to full size. And then on either side of the sentinel manzanita, we have some Our Lord's candles. So the Hesperoyucca whipplei is on this side, and then on the other side is back there. That was another one of the first plants that we put in. And then in front of that here, we've got a desert mallow that has the nice orange flowers, and one that's a little bit older is the one up closer to the house, another desert mallow. We'll see one that's in the back that's just a really an impressive specimen of desert mallow, despite growing in crazy conditions. And then in front of the desert mallow, we've got some poppies. Why am I spacing on it? So this is Ramia Coulteri. So this is Matalia poppy. Growing up from here, it grows by rhizomes, and so it's got some little places that it's popped up all over the place, but unlike a lot of places where I've seen the Matalia poppies, this seems like it's not super happy at that spot, so it's not going and completely taking over the front yard, which is also what they're known to do. So this is maybe one that's kind of kept in check by the conditions and how harshly that I treat the plants in the front yard. Then this plant here, this is sorry, I'm trying to do this on the fly. This is an Artemisia. It's the Great Basin sagebrush. It's the species name has a 3 in it because it basically has 3 tips to the leaves on them. I'm spacing on the name right now. And then the other thing I just found this morning, and of course it is closed up, that we've also got a tricolor gilia. This is a wildflower that has popped up, I think from a mix that I put out last fall, and just noticed the flower on it this morning. And we've got some other wildflowers down here too. So we got another type of gilia and some Clarkias that are up here. So the gilias is up there amongst the Yucca whipplei, and then and we have got another manzanita here next to this Hooker's Evening Primrose. So right down here we've got Del Mar manzanita. That it's probably wants to be more closer to the coast, but I put it in a place where when the grapevines come in, so that female grapevine still extends all the way out over here and grows pretty vigorous in that area, and that provides some shade in the summertime for this Del Mar manzanita. And so I think that's what is going to hopefully help it establish itself and then grow up to take up a good portion of the area over here. And then back we got some more sunset manzanitas. And then the thing that I'm really excited about and really hoping that it does well is, so next to these sunset manzanitas, just in time for the tour this year. This is a Vermontodendron that I just put in this past fall, with the hopes that it'll do well. And so I've tried Vermontodendrons in the past, and that they've all crapped out on me. But this one, I've kind of given it a little bit of cover with this sunset manzanita, and so the hope is that it'll like those conditions. I'm a little bit worried about the reflection from the morning sun up until the afternoon sun that it gets off of this reflection off of the wall. So we'll have to see if it gets burned out with the summer heat. But otherwise, the reason why I'm excited about the Vermontodendron, is because of what it's next to. So this is a Ceanothus cyanus. So one of the lakeside lilacs, one of the Ceanothus that we've got here on the property. And this one hasn't flowered yet, but I've also tried the Ceanothus cyanus before, and this one seems to be doing pretty well. It's the last 2 years has put out a couple of feet of growth. And can you just imagine when we've got the Ceanothus cyanus with its nice, brilliant purplish flowers right next to the Vermontodendron when it's in full bloom, and we'll just have this just amazing thing to look at right outside our dining room window right there. Then next to our little rain barrel, we've got some blue-eyed grass, these little iris relatives that are coming up with these cute little purple flowers. These are ones that I want to split and put into this area over here with all of the dudleas, and then just have this mass of purple that come up. And then another sunset manzanita. Here's that ashy leaf buckwheat again. And then next to that, right next to the oak tree, is a little hollyleaf cherry that we've put in this spot here. Now, that probably is not a wise idea, just based upon how big the cherry gets and how big the oak tree does, but I never said that I was a smart gardener. And then next to the oak and the sunset manzanita, this is a water bath, or not a water bath, a bird bath that I put in that is carved from a tree trunk. And for all you science nerds that are out there, that I've carved the tree trunk into a DNA double helix that has then the basin for the bird bath on top of it. So then going by as we get back towards the front porch, we have some fuchsia growing along the ground here. I threw in some wildflower seeds, and we got some poppies that are coming up over there. And then on either side of the front porch are some buckwheats that will be similarly frame the front of the house, just like the buckwheats that are on either side of the front porch. So as we walk into the path that we've got over here, this is a Tecate cypress. So it's got a nice, great bit of growth right outside the window. This is another plant that does really well in pretty harsh conditions. That a lot of these things that are here, they're surviving just on their own with no water, and the cypresses are just amazing with how they smell when you walk by them. This grows a little bit more wide than the Italian cypresses, and then not quite as tall. So we'll kind of see how tall this one grows. We've got another one next to it on the other side of the porch that's almost trying to think that it's an Italian cypress, with its growth pattern growing a little bit more tall and narrow. When we had the stucco redone on the house, these two Tecate cypresses were planted there already, and they just got totally trounced and stomped over by the guys doing the stucco. And amazingly, they came back and are just going like gangbusters, man. Up next to the house, we've got, this is a coast live oak that I did not plant. Why would somebody put a coast live oak right up next to the house? So this is most likely planted by a bird, but I'll eventually have to rip it out, but I don't have the heart to do so right now. All right, we're coming along to the side of the house. This is another Baccharis that I've put in, and this is just provides just some nice, beautiful color and nice greenery all year round. And then growing below the Baccharis, we've got some white chaparral currant, and these will go dormant in the summertime, but then come back in the springtime with all of these white flowers, and then send out their foliage afterwards. And this white currant is doing really well. A great little plant that we have. And then next to that, this thing that looks like an oak, this is a hollyleaf redberry. So essentially this will continue to look like an oak tree that will then put out a little tiny berries. And we've actually got some that are popping out. So this is just the beginning of those berries on the hollyleaf redberry. And these are ones that I've grown them from seed before. This is not one that I've grown from seed, but it's a great plant to have. And then some more black sage growing underneath it. And then this is another one of our ceanothus. So this is Ceanothus megacarpus, or the big berry ceanothus. It has leaves that look very similar to Ceanothus verrucosus, or the warty stem ceanothus, that we actually have some in the backyard. And for right now, it's got this kind of wide growth pattern. I need to trim it back as it's right up next to our house and then the neighbor's house. But what I found is that our ceanothuses grow really well when they're on the north-facing side of the house. And that's definitely been true for this Ceanothus megacarpus. And then one of my most favorite ceanothus that we have, and this is a Ceanothus leucodermis. So you can see that it's got pretty good growth now. And this is only a couple years old, but it had a most amazing flower display this year. So lots and lots of flowers on there. And as we come up, this is also where we had our hummingbird nests. So we had some Anna's hummingbirds that put up a nest there in this Ceanothus leucodermis. Now, this plant I've noticed is been battling whiteflies throughout all of its life, but it still puts out a lot of new growth every year. And I try and battle whiteflies as best I can, but if anybody out there have some good advice for battling whiteflies on Ceanothus, I am game for your opinions. So, in speaking of the Hooker's Evening Primrose that will grow just amazingly high, let's follow this stalk up here. So that's a stalk from a Hooker's Evening Primrose that is essentially was very nearly touching the eaves of the house. That's how tall they can get if you give them just the right conditions. And I wanted to sneak down in between our two Ceanothus, and what we've got down here, this cute little plant is a Neoridium dumosa, or a bush rue or berry rue. This is one of the only citrus family for Southern California. And this also was the first year that it started to put out flowers. So we got little flower buds on the Neoridium dumosa, and they put out little white flowers. So as a citrus family, just imagine flowers that are on an orange tree or a lemon tree, except much smaller, and it also puts out berries that are much smaller. So then as we come across on this side, I threw some seeds from bladder pods. And so we've got a little bladder pod that's growing right down here. And then this is an elegant Clarkia that's coming up on the other side of the fence. All right, so then as we come in into the backyard, we first come across, and so this was something that would have been trimmed up for the tour, but we've got another one of the desert mallows that's right here, and it's actually growing out of a pot, if it would surprise you. So inside this pot here, we actually have three things. So we've got this Baccharis that is growing up out of there, as well as down here, this is deerweed that just volunteered coming out of the pot. And it's kind of going through its second flower cycle. You can see, I've got a couple over here where it's starting to put out some flowers again, and it's got some more seeds that it's dropping down. But the main thing that's coming out of this is this desert mallow, and so you can see just how tall this mallow is. Very happy just living in this pot that really doesn't get any water other than the water that we get from the rain, despite it living in pots. And so then next to that, we've got, this is apricot mallow. So another desert mallow, but this is just, I love these for the feel of their leaves, that they just have very, very soft leaves. And the leaf shape can vary a lot depending upon where it grows. So it's pretty happy in this spot, and so it has nice big leaves, but we'll see some that are on the south side of the house that have very, very small leaves, but those plants are still doing great too. And in a pot next to here we've got a little Farah cactus that's growing next to the desert mallow, and then got some buckwheat that is not doing as well in this spot. I think that it might want some more sun, so we'll see what happens with the summer growth. And then growing in pots here, these are 2 Catalina mountain mahoganies. So these are the Cercocarpus traskii, doing pretty well in pots. And then this is another apricot mallow that's kind of growing in this little spot in the center of our back patio that's here. And then next to the desert mallow and the apricot mallow, we have this large tree trunk that's coming up here. That used to be an ash tree. So this is an ash tree that was growing up in the vegetable garden, and I originally thought that it was some peppers. And as soon as it started to grow, I really realized that it was not a pepper, but I thought I'd just let it grow and see what happened. It turned out that it was an ash tree baby that came from the big ash tree that's in the back of our property there. And I eventually decided that this ash tree was gonna put down lots of seeds all over the place and make a big mess, and so I didn't want it here at this spot on the patio. And so we put in next to it to replace it is this plant here. This is another desert willow. And I like the spot here because it gets lots of sun right here in the summertime in the middle of this flagstone patio. So it gives it the heat that it wants, this being a desert plant. But then also the desert willow typically grows in washes out in the desert, and so it likes to have a little bit of water in the summertime. And so what we've got is our outflow from our air conditioner actually comes down underneath the sidewalk and then ends up in an area that's really close to the base of this desert willow, so it'll also get some summer water despite us not actually purposefully watering the plants. So we've got a couple of additional plants in pots. We've got some Deadlia that are in the pots over here. We'll talk about those in a little bit. And then right here on this side up next to the garage, we've got a bladder pod that I put in. That this is one that it just is super happy in that spot. It is taken off and taken over this area, and is essentially, it flowers all year long. It is just a gorgeous plant to have here on the edge of the patio. And behind it, and got a couple plants here that are in this area. So just right down here next to this pot where there's a whole bunch of miner's lettuce coming out. So we got a bunch of miner's lettuce here. There are some deadlias that are in the pot that are covered by the bladder pod. I need to trim back the bladder pod, but I love that plant so much. So we have another hollyleaf redberry that's here, and also what you can see coming out over it, this is a chaparral currant. So, or excuse me, a Catalina currant. It's the evergreen currant, the ribes yeah, it's been long enough that I've looked at the names. But Ribes vermicularum or something like that. I have to to look it back up again. So we've got the evergreen currant is growing up here, and then next to it, this is a ceanothus. This is a volunteer ceanothus. It's got to have some type of ceanothus. Anchor Bay, or what's the other common one? But what you'll notice, it's got these beautiful glossy leaves, and the new growth that comes in, the leaves are just absolutely huge. So you can see how big that leaf is relative to my hand. Just absolutely spectacular plant, and that my plan is to make cuttings out of this and turn this into Ceanothus rolando. So Rolando is the neighborhood that we live in, and that's a really special Ceanothus that I think more people need to share. So in front of this bladder pot, got another plants in pots. We got some more blue-eyed grass that's growing out of the pot, along with this is some columbine that does really well in the pots. It's just now starting to put out its flowers. And then next to the bladder pod coming up here this is kind of our Ceanothus row. So on the left-hand side, this Ceanothus that's coming up, this is Ceanothus spinosus, so the green bark Ceanothus. And then one of the plants that I put in the backyard, among the earliest ones, this is Ceanothus varicosus. And so it is just growing to the side of this pathway that leads to the rest of the garden. And there's another Ceanothus varicosus, this one here on this side, that they're not too many years apart, but the one that's on the north side of the garage seems to like that habitat much better than the one that's gets more of the south-facing sun. But it's getting enough shade, I think, from its buddy on this side of the pathway, and so it's now starting to establish itself and grow. And so essentially my goal is to have this one grow and fill in this spot up here, and then make a little archway that we have to kind of walk through the wilderness, through the Ceanothus to get to the other side. So here's just some additional plants in the backyard. That up in the corner here, this is a Cercocarpus minutaflorus, so this is the San Diego mountain mahogany, and this is also one I put in a couple years back, and is one that has been a slow grower. So on the south-facing side, gets lots of summer heat, but I essentially just gave it an enormous amount of water the first year when we put it in, when I planted it, but then other than that, basically haven't watered it since, and it's taken its time, but is now doing really healthy. It's also the first time that it flowered this year. So when these guys flower, they have these little tiny yellow flowers, and then they'll put out these little seed pods that look like little feathers sticking out from there. And so what we want to do is eventually light it up so that in the evening you can see just kind of the feathery glow off of the seed pods being backlit by some lights that are coming out. So then next to it, we've got some more of the Baja fairy duster. And then behind this bench that I built, this is another San Diego sagebrush. And this is actually one of the oldest plants that's in the front yard. And we've got lots of babies from this sagebrush. So there's some that have come up on their own. So this is a sagebrush volunteer that have come from this one. And then behind that, this is a big berry manzanita. So Arctocephalus glauca. And this is one that just has been growing behind this bench here, and essentially has been thriving on pretty much no water. That I've just let it be, and it seems to be perfectly happy with just me letting it be. It is also like some of the Howard Min manzanitas in the front yard. It's starting to put out a second round of flowers, and going to give us some more growth this year before it goes and slows down in the summertime. And then next to the big berry manzanita, where we see this red growth here, this is lemonade berry. Now you might notice little streaks on the back fence back there. And those streaks came from the lemonade berry. So the lemonade berry was actually filling in this area here, and I was training it like a tree to kind of come up and potentially shade this bench in the afternoon. But with all of the rain that we got last winter, not this winter, it fell over and is now essentially covering and partially covering the Ceanothus verrucosus that's over there. So I've had to cut it back a lot, and then now I'm encouraging the more of the growth to come up here. So maybe it won't grow like a tree, but will be this nice bush here up against the fence. And then growing up amongst the lemonade berry, we have some morning glories that are coming up. Got a couple morning glories all over the place in the backyard. And so here's our little patch of deadlias, and we have another pot with some sedum, and then this is the barrel cactus, and then here inside this, which is getting a little bit of overgrowth from the Encelia californica. We've got this guy here, which is the Euphorbia misera. So this is one of the native euphorbias. It's got some of its flower that it's putting out. And they do pretty well in pots. I've had to get a new one and put it in this pot here along with the sedum. So that one's not very old. And then beneath the Ceanothus verrucosus, we have some more buckwheat here. And then in this little pot, I just put these in this year. We have some Erigeron glaucus that has some purple astery flowers, and then this is yarrow that has nice white flowers that the white flowers have kind of died back, and then behind it, this is a gooseberry. So that's the Ribes speciosum. So it's the red or fuchsia flowering gooseberry. And then as we kind of walk through this area, here's our other Ceanothus verrucosus that's coming up. And then next to that Ceanothus verrucosus, this is another hybrid Ceanothus. This is the Ceanothus rigidus snowball. Great little plant, got these cute little tiny leaves on them, and this is also one of the oldest Ceanothus that we've got. So it grows a little bit lower than the Ceanothus verrucosus that I've got behind me, but that's its typical growth pattern. So if you don't want a huge Ceanothus like the verrucosus that we've got, that is behind us here. Here's our Ceanothus verrucosus. That the rigidus snowball is one that does really well here, even with that south-facing sun. And then here, what is just has been an absolute delight. This area here is the other part of Ceanothus row, where's what I call it. We've got another Ceanothus spinosus, and this is a one that's still pretty low growing, not on purpose. So this is one that's maybe about 4.5 feet tall or so, and it was put in the ground at the same time as this giant monster that is next to us is probably about 15 feet tall or so. So put in the ground at the same time, and I don't know if it's a matter of getting some shade from the chicken coop that's behind, or maybe some additional nitrogen or nutrients coming from the chicken coop, but the one that's farther back has definitely been much happier and grown much taller than the one that we have in front of us. And then intermixed with this area, so we've got these is a golden currant. We can see the little currants that are growing on them. So we have a whole patch of golden currants that are here. There's actually another Ceanothus verrucosus that's here on this side that the currant is kind of growing intermixed between, and in fact is using the Ceanothus verrucosus here for support to grow this giant stalk coming off of the currant. So that currant up there has got to be about like 8 feet tall or so. And so when was the last time you saw a Ribes aureum or golden currant that was like 8 feet tall or so? So in this spot here, this is kind of an area that I took a cue from nature and from hiking. And growing underneath the ceanothus, this is Cucchiella cordifolia. So the heartleaf penstemon, or climbing penstemon is another name for it. So you often find it on north-facing slopes, kind of growing as a little bit of an understory plant. And so I put that one in, not this past fall, but the fall before, and it really seems to be happy there. Puts out these gorgeous red flowers and has really kind of expanded its growth a lot more this year. This is one of the plants I'm most excited about, and really looking forward to seeing what it's going to do. And next to it, we have some wildflowers that were put in. And one of them with these purple flowers, this is called fiesta flower. So you can kind of have a close look at the flowers that are there. Really gorgeous little, amazing little flowers. And where I've seen this thing grow, it typically has been growing kind of low to the ground, but somebody, I don't know if the fact that it was next to this morning glory vine, but somebody convinced this fiesta flower that it needed to grow like a vine, and so is growing up and up, intermixed, and trying to grow with the ceanothus, and so having these cute little fiesta flowers that are up there. In addition to that fiesta flower that's acting like a vine, we do have intentional vines here, and that amongst the morning glory, we also have this clematis that's growing up amongst the ceanothus. This is also the first year that the clematis flowered for me, so I was really super excited for that. And where the base of the clematis is actually tucked away in the back right next to this rain barrel. It's growing at the base of this trellis that I have it trained on. So a lot of the growth of the clematis is back there along the trellis, but that as vines do, and as I am happy to see, it's coming out from there and kind of growing intermixed with the other plants in this area. And then behind the ceanothus, this is another Tecate cypress that's behind it. All right, so coming back and walking amongst our cherries, and then against this ceanothus that's here. This is the Ceanothus rigidus snowball. I put in another lemonade berry that's back up against the back, so that the plan is to fill in this area up against the fence. And it didn't really do much growth at all last year, and so I was excited to see that it's been able to put out some new growth. So you can kind of see the slight reddish tinge on the leaves, and so it's putting out some new growth this year. Got some more Encelia californica, and then also in amongst the Encelia californica is another sunflower. So this is the San Diego sunflower in front of us, and so it hasn't yet flowered, but it's getting ready to. And so we've got these two different types of sunflowers that are growing up here in the back. And then behind these sunflowers, you can't really, we can look at another angle to see it. We can actually talk about all the flowers that are growing amongst the pathways. We got some more bladder pod that's here on the left-hand side. And then here we have some more of those elegant Clarkias, and this is more like what the Clarkia growth pattern is like. So you can see the cute little pink flowers on the Clarkias that are over there, and these will just be covered in flowers. So they are just at their very beginning of their blooms, and we got them on this side of the pathway, and then also on this side of the pathway. They're coming up here. And then above the elegant Clarkias, we have our coast live oak. So this is one that is planted not necessarily for us, but for the future. We're really excited for this coast live oak to go and establish itself. All right, and as we come and kind of see this area of the gardens, we've got a little fire pit and then a Dudleya Bertoni growing up against the rock garden that's over there. And then behind this is Pseudonathallium that's taking up that area. It's got some nice, beautiful ashy foliage. And then on this side of the pathway, in addition to the coast live oak that's here, we have a Quercus burbatifolia. So this is the scrub oak. And then behind the scrub oak, this is our chicken coop, where we have some grapevines that are growing on the chicken coop. And then next to the chicken coop, we have a Palo Verde that, starting next month or so, then this tree will be completely covered with yellow flowers. So we just kind of look back at the pathway that we came from. So we had our fiesta flowers over here, and then also in this area, there are a bunch of Chinese houses that are coming up, and those haven't flowered yet, but we have on this side our first of our Chinese houses has started to come up, and so there's the first of the Chinese houses is back there. So just imagine the area here, it had all those fiesta flowers, and then just imagining it with the white and the purple from those Chinese houses that are coming up. And hopefully they'll reseed themselves and then give us some more of them permanently in that spot. All right. Back here in the back up against the wall, maybe see a little hint of it, is we have a chamise that's back there. And so chamise will be perfectly happy in the full sun coming off of the wall back there. And the chamise should fill up this area up against the wall in that spot. And then to kind of complete our Ceanothus row, that we have a Ceanothus crassifolia. And this is an amazing plant. So it's got pretty decent sized leaves on it right now, but in the summertime, when it goes into its dormancy, those leaves it'll drop the bigger leaves and keep the smaller leaves, but it is super tough, and it can absolutely handle just no water, getting that summer sun, does just fine, comes back every year, and this will be one that will fill in this area and give us a lot more greenery up against the fence there. This white flower here, this is an astragalus, and this is just an amazing butterfly and hummingbird plant. It puts out lots and lots of seeds and flowers, and does really well. I really love that plant. Got another golden currant up the back there. And then next to the golden currant, this is another one of the Nevins barberries. So I think this might be the one that I got from seeds by chewing on berries at the Wildlife Park. No, I didn't do that, never mind. And then we put this bench here, and the bench is shaded by this tree mallow here. So you just notice how big that tree mallow is. And this is now with no water, and is living underneath the shade of the ash tree. So I think that kind of helps it thrive. But it just makes this awesome, cute little spot to sit and look out and hang out with the chickens. Just kind of see here, this little area, so you can kick up your feet and just enjoy this little spot here. This is also an area where the hummingbirds will come and feed off of both the bladder pods and then the golden currants, and then we'll sit up on top of the telephone wires and chatter. And so nice little spot to just sit here and relax in the garden. In front of us, we've got some other Dudleas. So this is Dudleya lanceolata, and then we got a globegilia and some poppies that have come up over here. And then this is the parent plant of those Shah's agabes that are in the front yard. All right, so kind of go across this pathway here, and got a little area that we have a little hammock that's set up, and so we can set up a hammock here underneath the shade of the ash tree. Got some Encelia again that's over on that side, and then in this little bowl here, we have some hackberry that we've got that I've got growing in a pot. It is putting out its growth, just kind of coming back a little bit. Got some of its spring spring growth. I think I need to transplant that and put it back in there, or put it back in a new pot. Up against the fence over here is we have, this is Baccharis salicifolia, so this is mule fat. And then in front of the mule fat, and this plant over here is summer holly. This is one that I've planted a couple times. Haven't found quite the best spot for it, but I think this should be a good spot for the summer holly to grow. All right, we'll come back up along our bridge. I was inspired with this bridge walking through the Japanese garden in Portland. They have just all of these stones pathways that were out there, and so I fashioned these out of concrete with forms. Each of these weigh about 120 pounds or so, so they're not going anywhere, and they serve as this nice little bridge over dry riverbed that we've got that spans this area and then meanders out over here. We've got another bridge that goes across and it goes back underneath the orange trees and the lemon tree over there. And what also this dry riverbed serves as a path for where we've got our gray water outflow comes out under here and then lets out in a spot about over there or so. So in front of us, this is mugwort, so Artemisia douglassiana, and got a great smelling plant, and one that you can cut back to the ground every year, and it'll come back up. It's got a nice little patch of it, and then again got some bladder pod, and then got a toyon. That the hope with the toyon is to fill up this space here and provide a nice, fun little archway to walk past. And let's see, so then next to the chicken coop, we've got another little bird bath that I made, and found out that it leaks, so it's much better as a planter. And so I've got some marjoram and some rosemary and some thyme growing in here next to the chicken coop. And then in barrels, we just got some South African basil, and then all of these are all pineapples. And then next to the pineapple here on this side, we've got some dragon fruit that's coming up. So this is getting away from the native area and getting more edible into the edibles. And this is kind of our propagation area that's not in its not cleaned up just because the tour wasn't coming back this year, but this is another spot where we got some more Encelia, and then this is our complaint area back here where all these cacti are, and then you have some toyon that's here. This is one of the first toyons that I planted, and most of the plant died back, and I cut it back to the ground, and it has sprouted back up again and seems to be doing pretty healthy. So that's the thing with crown sprouters like toyon, that if they do seem like they're not doing so well, sometimes you can just chop them back to the ground, and just like they would respond to a fire, they can come back up and put out their new growth. So before we went completely native, this is a non-native plant there, but it's next to underneath this gorgeous elderberry. I love elderberries. They are, not only do they give you berries you can put in things like pancakes and things like that, but their leaves also smell like peanut butter. And then the other tree that we've got here is a honey mesquite, Prosopis glandulosa. And it's now also just putting out its growth. It puts out these seed pods that we can grind up into flour, and amongst the many requests that my friends have is for me to make mesquite almond cookies. And then behind the elderberry, we have laurel sumac coming up behind them. So these are two big plants that are pretty close together to one another, but they're both two really amazing bird plants. And they're also kind of serve a special place in our hearts because buried at the base of each of those two, or actually in the hole where those two plants are buried, my wife's two cats that she brought to California are buried. They died within a couple of years of one another. So the elderberry that has the blue the blue fruits that come off of it is kind of put in the place for Puer, which was my wife's cat that had was Siamese, that had blue eyes, and then the laurel sumac that's planted back there that has the fiery red, angry growth that is sometimes a skin irritant is the other cat Chaser who hated everybody. All right, and then growing underneath the laurel sumac, we have some Cleveland sage that was not originally planted in the shade of the laurel sumac, but would probably like to be in full sun, but is growing as well as it can underneath the shade of these two trees. And then we also have filling in this space is this is a red shanks, so a relative of the chamise. That will also grow up and kind of fill in this spot. And then this area here's our main morning glory factory where we've got these morning glories that are growing across this archway that do a good job of hiding the trash cans that are hidden, that are back behind there. And so we've got this little archway for us to walk through to take the trash out. And then also I cannot recommend enough planting something on the way to your trash cans that you can walk by and rub up against and give you a nice smell. And so that's what this sagebrush there is for, to kind of eliminate the smell coming from the trash cans. All right, so we've made our way through the backyard and come back out onto the other side, and we've got some wishbone bush that's growing up against here. This makes a really nice purple color that when these guys are in bloom. And these are also ones that go summer dormant, so they will die back and look like completely dead sticks in the summertime, but then once we get rains, that they'll come back like gangbusters again. And then next to it, we have, this is another manzanita that really is just trying to grow out from the wall and grow up against the driveway. This is a paradise manzanita, and this is southwest facing along a rock wall, gets a lot of reflective heat, and yet it seems to be doing just amazing. Got some amazing red growth coming off of it. And then next to it, I have a patch of desert bluebells. I love these wildflowers. And we've got a bunch of the desert bluebells planted along the pathway here, and then also have poppy, not a poppy, lupin that's coming up. And I thought that lupin was done, but we just got a little bit of rain and it's put out some more flowers again. And then kind of walking along the pathway, we do have some more of the wishbone bushes, the 4 o'clocks, that have come up along the base of the wall. And then we have some more Encelia californica, the bush sunflower, up over here. And then this is a mammillary cactus that we've got here. This is another one of the 4 o'clocks, the mirabilis. And then next to the mirabilis, we have another one of our narrow leaf milkweeds that this just completely volunteered, came up in that spot. Don't grow too big, but they do seem to come back every year. All right, and as we walk further out, we've got, this is a quail bush, and this totally just can get huge and just takes up this entire space next to the walkway, and it does kind of creep out a little bit into the walkway, so I need to trim it back. But if you need something that doesn't need any care, can deal with pretty harsh conditions, so this gets nice sun in the summertime and is in an area where I can't really water it, and it is just absolutely thriving. But you can't put it into too confined an area because it can get big. But this serves as basically a hideout for lots of different birds. So we may hear the birds as we walk by our other salt bush, but they make a whole lot of space inside there that they can just go back in and hide from predators and things like that. So next to the salt bush is we have a desert lavender that's coming out. And probably not the best spot for the desert lavender because it's getting overcrowded by the salt bush. But there was a time when the salt bush wasn't that big. And then we got another Tecate cypress up against the walkway here. There's also one that's gotten a little bit big for its britches, but I love this Tecate cypress because I've been able to see the pattern of growth of its cones. So what we've got here is these are the pollen cones that it's putting out. And then a little bit up above, we've got some fertilized female cones so that those will mature and might be able to collect some seeds from them and grow some more Tecate cypress. And so then here's some more of the salt bush. And then on the other side of the salt bush, we've got some burgro cactus, and then some more of the desert mallow. And then this is the other apricot mallow that I was talking about. So now here in the area where it gets no water and gets south-facing sun, reflective heat off of the house, the leaves are a lot smaller, but still it's absolutely thriving and doing really well right next to this desert lavender, which is a little bit happier and not being quite as crowded as the other one. And then that takes us back to our spot with our Mexican sage. We've got some more Shaw's agave, and then also have some San Diego sunflower that when that comes into bloom, then we have the nice yellow from the San Diego sunflower with the nice purple from the Mexican sage. And then this is right back where we started from, so that was our tour of the garden.